Hey everybody, it's the Bald Man once again, and this time we're going to be talking about the spending and tax multipliers. But before we begin, I'd like to give a big shout out to Carla Jimenez's dad. Carla came in this morning and told me how you were sharing a moment discussing macroeconomics thanks to my video yesterday, and she said it created a really strong dad-daughter bonding moment. So I'm glad I could help. And, let me continue. So we're going to start off by talking about the average propensity to consume and the average propensity to save. So what this refers to is our regular paycheck. What are we going to do with this money? Well, first of all, it happens, right? The same thing happens with everybody's paycheck. The government takes their taxes off the top, and what we're left with is called our disposable income. Now, we can decide what we do with our disposable income, how much we're going to spend on rent, how much we're going to spend on a car, gas, just because of all the personal decisions that we're going to make. Now, the government doesn't really concern itself with our average propensity to consume and save because, this is our regular paycheck. This is what we use to live in and thrive in the world. So they tend to leave this alone, right? And by the way, there's a reason why your average propensity to consume and your average propensity to save adds up to 1. Because there's only 2 things you can legally do with money, and that is spend it or save it. That is why it always has to equal to 1. What we're going to discuss today in more detail is the marginal propensity to consume and the marginal propensity to save. If you remember from, I think it was the first day in class, I said in macroeconomics, marginal means additional. This is the money that the government cares about. What are they going to do with this money if they get it, right? Whether it's a Christmas bonus, a signing bonus, income tax refund, anything like that, right? The government wants to know what you're going to do with this money because they use this information to create the spending and tax multipliers, which then will help them out with their fiscal policy. What are they going to do to fix a bad economy if we're in a recession or if we're overextended, right? But we'll talk more about we'll talk more about fiscal policy in another video. Let's get back to the marginal propensity to consume and marginal propensity to save. Again, this deals with additional monies that we make, not our regular paycheck, but additional monies that we may be earning. And the same thing, it has to add up to 1. Why? Because there's only 2 things we can do with money. That's spend or save. So let's get on with the formulas and try to find both the spending and tax multipliers. So first of all, the formula for the spending multiplier is going to be 1 over MPS. All right, 1 over our marginal propensity to save. So what does this all mean? Well, if we were to hear that our marginal propensity to consume is equal to 0.9, in other words, we're going to spend 90% of every dollar that we make, how much money could that possibly create in the future? And that's why we're using the spending multiplier to find out how much the money that we spend creates even more money in economic activity down the road, right? So first of all, let's find out what the multiplier is if the marginal propensity to consume is 0.9. So we do know that MPC plus MPS has to equal to 1. And if MPC is 0.9, that must mean my MPS has to equal to 0.1. Why? 0.9 plus 0.1 will equal to 1. Now, I also know that we do not like decimals inside fractions, so I have to turn that into a fraction. And I do know that 0.10 is actually 1/10, right? So this is actually 1 1/10. And that means my multiplier is going to be 10. If my MPC is 0.9, my multiplier is 10. What about if my marginal propensity to consume is 0.8? Well, in this case, this our spending multiplier would be 1 over 0.2. Once again, 0.8 and 0.2 equals to 1, so I know that I am correct. I also know that 20% is a fifth, right? So I know that this has to be 1 over 1/5, which means my multiplier in this case will be 5. So let's move on and solve for if the MPC is equal to 0.75, what is my multiplier going to be now? Well, now it's going to be 1 over 0.25. Again, 0.25 plus 0.75 will give me 1. And I do know that 0.25 is a quarter. 1 over a quarter will give me a multiplier of 4. Let's move on. Right? If we do our MPC is equal to 0.5, that must mean our MPS is also equal to 0.5. 0.5 plus 0.5 will give me 1. And I know that 0.5 is actually a half. That must mean my multiplier is going to be 2 if my MPC equals to 0.5. Now, what if my MPC is equal to 0? Well, in this case, it's going to be 1 over 1, and that means my multiplier is going to be 1. Right? So, in a nutshell, that is how we find our spending multiplier. Our tax multiplier is a little different, right? There's a different formula for it. The formula for the tax multiplier is going to be MPC, not MPS. My mistake. It's going to be MPC over MPS. All right, so we'll do the same thing and try to find the multipliers. If my MPC is equal to 0.9, then my multiplier is going to be 0.9 over 0.1, and that is going to give me a multiplier of 9. Moving on, if my marginal propensity to consume is 0.8, I know that my marginal propensity to save has to equal to 0.2. Why? 0.8 plus 0.2 will give me 1. So 0.8 over 0.2 will give me a multiplier of 4. If we move on to MPC, our marginal propensity to consume is 0.75. In this case, we have 0.75 over 0.25. And here we wind up with the multiplier of 3. If our marginal propensity to consume is equal to 0.5, here we have 0.5 over 0.5, and that is going to give me 1. Right, so that in a nutshell is how we find our spending and tax multipliers. One thing we should notice here, guys, if for whatever reason you're working with a tax multiplier, and for whatever reason you cannot remember the tax multiplier formula, but you do remember the spending multiplier formula, guys, you should have noticed that the tax multiplier is always going to be 1 less than the spending multiplier. So if you can figure out the spending multiplier, just subtract 1 and you will have the tax multiplier instead. If you guys have any questions, please don't be afraid to let me know. Either send me a message on Remind or drop a comment, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.